Hey everyone, so I just wanted to begin this video with a small message. I didn't expect to enjoy writing these scripts and making these videos as much as I did, and I'm planning to keep to the once a month schedule for the foreseeable future in terms of releases. So in that spirit, I've now got a Patreon for those of you who want to support me. You can get a bunch of perks such as seeing all of the cursed stuff I can find during my research, access to my Discord server where I put all of my work from the stream and all the other places, and from here as well, alongside some early access, shout outs at the end of the video, and really anything else I think of, because to be honest, I just want to share cool stuff with you all. So if you're able, I'd appreciate it. If you're not, or you don't want to, well, I appreciate you being here anyway. It's happened again. A Twitter account called Thick Perestroika has arrived in your mentions and spoonerized your name. Just for having an opinion. You're mad. Your name's not Hand Dodges, or Steer Karma, or Derasitum. How dare this anonymous coward show up in your Twitter thread and disrespect you in such a manner? What would you, a person with a platform who's willing to throw their weight around, do if this was done to you in person? Well, you might simply tell them to piss off while you walk away, or you might try to call their manager. Wait, but Thick Perestroika is anonymous. How do you call the manager on an anonymous person? Threaten their livelihood in such a way that you can force, if not agreement, then compliance and civility? That seems to be the question that runs through the minds of many people in the UK with varying levels of public platform, given that social media now enables loudmouths, dickheads, and assorted dipshits to speak back to you. And sometimes the dipshits and the loudmouths are right, and people can see that they're right and you're wrong. Under normal circumstances, if you're wrong about something and shown to be wrong, you might just take the L and get on with your day. But not you. Never you. So you need a pretext, an excuse to strip people of their anonymity, and lo and behold, England make it to the final of Euro 2020 and, sadly, England lose on penalties. Here's the trick though. All of the players who missed penalties were black, triggering an avalanche of racist abuse from people on just about every social media site you could imagine. So what's the solution to the disgusting racist abuse faced by the England footballers who missed? To get rid of online anonymity. That's a short summary of one of the major discourses about online anonymity that caught my attention. But why is stripping people of the right to conceal their identity on the internet what some people claim will solve abuse? Why would people choose to be anonymous? And is it, in fact, good, actually, to have anonymity as an option? Well, I'm going to try and provide the answers to all that for you. So don your Guy Fawkes mask, fire up your VPN, and join me as we enter a world where you're only as good as your username.
A brief history.
People have sought ways of being anonymous pretty much from there being an internet to post on. If you were around at the very beginning of the internet being something you could access from home, I wasn't, I'm not that old, you're probably instinctively in favor of online anonymity because that's probably what you were told to do. There's also been a long history of people publishing anonymous works. Some of them are among the most well-regarded cultural works that persist to the modern day, such as the composition of Oğuz Turkic epic stories, the Book of Dede Korkut, which was published anonymously. Or anonymity was a way for monarchs to publish their artistic endeavours without, having to execute everyone for saying that their love poetry was laying it on a little bit thick. Looking at you, Suleiman, Muhibi, really? You're going for lover as your poetry handle? But we're not here to make fun of Ottoman emperors for their poor choice of poetry handle. We're going to take a brief look at how online anonymity has evolved over time. As I said at the very beginning, if you were around at the very beginning of the internet, you are probably very confused by the idea that someone wouldn't be anonymous online. The internet is often referred to as a Wild West, partially due to the fact that it's often regarded as unregulated, and while many governments have tried to change that as it's become a bigger part of our lives, it can still be a bit of a Wild West at times. Those of you who are well, I'm just going to come out and say it. Old will remember early internet chat rooms, forums, and bulletin boards. The bulletin boards were basically where you'd have to use your phone in order to download the messages from some guy's computer through your modem, and if you wanted to see the result of your attempt to wind someone up, you'd have to go through the whole pain again, not knowing whether they'd replied or not. It won't surprise you to know that as soon as something that we would consider more like the internet we know today emerged, that the bulletin boards declined and were replaced by things like chat rooms and forums. The neat thing about a forum is that you get to choose your username, and you'd have to be a real idiot to use identifying information on them. Yeah, I know. I never said I was smart. The only thing that would be tracked is your IP address, which somewhat calls into question how anonymous anyone really is. But I suppose that's what proxies and VPNs are for. The beauty of it is that when you're on a forum under your handle, no one can really judge your content because of who you are. Are you a 17-year-old who just happens to know more about the space race than a 40-year-old middle manager? Well, no one's going to be able to say, what the fuck do you know, you're 17, if you happen to be right. In fact, forums have been incredibly influential, not just on the way in which some people use the internet, but on the actual culture emerging from the internet into the real world. So sites where people have been able to be anonymous, indeed, it's kind of regarded as the default on a lot of these websites, have had a profound impact on our culture. Of course, just because things have always been a certain way doesn't mean it should remain that way forever, and as the internet became something that was used to connect more directly with friends, some of those default behaviors were challenged. As the internet developed, what we now call social networks began to form. If you're watching this on YouTube, then you probably know what a social network is, but in case someone from the distant future is watching this, first of all, did you ever solve that whole climate change thing? Or if you're someone from the distant past, I don't know, I'm not really sure what to say. Just enjoy the whole not dying from minor injuries thing we have going on. I'll do a very, very short summary for you though. You go on a website, you register, you're asked for a bunch of personal information like your name, age, and so on, which, if we're thinking about it, is kind of a disaster waiting to happen, and yet most of us seem to have done it. Now, of course, there are some websites where it made more sense just not to use your actual name. For example, Twitter, where the point is to blurt out every single thought that you have during the day. But generally, this is how these sites were and continue to be used. If you want an idea of what people who founded these websites might think of you for simply handing over your data, again, yeah, I know, then check out this IM conversation involving Mark Zuckerberg.
Yeah, so if you ever need info about anyone at Harvard, just ask. I have over 4,000 emails, pictures, addresses, SNS. People just submitted it. I don't know why. They trust me. The dumb fucks.
So, yeah, maybe on that front alone, anonymity is something to be cherished. That neatly brings us on to the state of online anonymity today. It's become an industry of its own. If you check out any YouTuber's videos, except mine, then you'll see them do an ad for something like NordVPN, which promises to cover your tracks online or let you see what's available on American Netflix. Currently, sites like Facebook require you to use a real name with some degree of verification to make a new account, with the justification that people behave a lot better when they have their real names down, as Randy Zuckerberg put it. But we'll be getting to whether having your real name down really changes your behavior a little bit later. Twitter can ask you for a phone number, but you're free not to use your name. YouTube, well, look, do you all think I'm actually called SK the Crusader? And some people clearly don't want the option of not using your real name to be available. We can choose not to use our names on some platforms. It doesn't really tell us why people choose to do it. So let's examine some of the reasons people may choose to be anonymous.
Why be anonymous?
Some of you watching this will be watching it on YouTube accounts without your name on it, and without any easy way to identify who you are. And you'll each have your own reason. I just want to say at the beginning of this section that because I feel like it, is a perfectly fine reason to operate an anonymous account. There are, however, a lot of other reasons why people feel compelled to be anonymous, and there's an argument to be made that the right to be anonymous online allows certain people to actually have access to certain human rights that we would consider fundamental, especially since, as we'll see in the next section, a lot of the impact of denying people anonymity will be damaging to vulnerable people and infringe upon people's right to freedom of expression, privacy, and even their lives. Some quick examples of when you might want to use anonymity for you all before we get into some anecdotes from friends of mine in the super secret and very cool Discord that I run. If you're someone who has an abusive ex-partner, you may not be pleased to have your name all over the internet. If you're engaging in activism against the far right, having your face and name out there paints a pretty big target on your back. If you live in a country where having an opinion counter to the government of the day gets you put on a list. If you're LGBTQ+, but can't allow people to know yet, you may want to express that identity from the safety of an anonymous account. If you're a whistleblower. And finally, if you're working in a job that has certain restrictions on what you can and can't say on social media. Now, let's look at some anecdotal evidence. And before everyone starts going, "Oh, I don't care about anecdotal evidence" at me, first of all, you need to think about what kind of evidence you're focusing on in your analyses and what that might mean about the conclusions you're drawing. And secondly, it's my video, so I can use whatever evidence I want. So let's go through the reasons that people sent to me on Discord about why they chose to be anonymous, and they gave me their permission to share their reasons with you, so let's check them out.
I work for the civil service, so A, I'm theoretically supposed to be politically neutral. Admittedly, I'm at a fairly low grade, so it shouldn't be a big deal. And B, I've seen what right-wing media tries to do to people in public sector roles who step outside a very narrow set of parameters set by them.
I work in a fairly conservative industry, so I would rather not have the stuff I do on the internet link back too much to my real identity. I'm probably not as strict as others, but I want some plausible deniability if someone does go snooping.
I work as a social worker in adult mental health, and I could really do without being struck off by Social Work England. My registration details are publicly available on the website, along with full details and annotations of any formal suspensions or reprimands if I bring my profession into disrepute. Also, my job involves working for the local government and carrying out assessments under the Care Act 2014, Mental Capacity Act 2005, and Mental Health Act 1983, and in theory, I'm supposed to carry out those functions in a politically neutral way. So if a service user sees me mouthing off on social media and they disagree with my opinions, that's a pretty impossible situation to be in, really.
If I wasn't anonymous online, I'd probably be the only major result of my name. Plus my work and the place I work in would make it very difficult for me to share anything publicly. Also, as a minority, I'm worried about the fash because they ramped up their doxing and abuse in the last year. I wouldn't want anything to happen to my friends and family because of my opinions.
There were other reasons given to me, ranging from not wanting the far right to identify you, to having a unique name meaning your details are easy to find, to simply wanting a space to express thoughts and feelings that the person was having that they don't speak about on accounts with their name on it. There was also a general fear of being identified by journalists with reference to the infamous Laura Kuenssberg "This is him here" tweet, where she identified a member of the public who had confronted Boris Johnson about the state of Britain's hospitals. So we have a grasp of why people choose to be anonymous, but that means we need to understand what the motivating drive is to end anonymity, and we need to assess why those people, no matter how well-intentioned and justified they may be, are wrong.
Why do some people want to end anonymity?
There are a lot of reasons why someone may want to end online anonymity. We're going to take a look at two general types of people who seem to really want anonymity to end. One is the blue ticks on the hatedtwitter.com and the people who have experienced abuse directed at them en masse and who have connected several things that are true at the same time in order to come up with a solution that doesn't really work. So first, let's have a look at the blue ticks. There's one school of thought, which is the "why are these mean accounts owning me online" school of thought, where you see things like lower tier celebrities being rubbed the wrong way by a random account and deciding, whether they're anonymous or not, to direct a lot of hatred towards an account that's disrespected them. Now, I'm not saying that no blue tick ever in the history of the world has ever received abuse. Everyone who's ever posted online has probably received some. Here's the thing. A lot of the desire to strip anonymity from users on social media reads to me as less of a concern for the abused, or a desire for a better discourse, or, dare I say it, a kinder, gentler politics, but a desire to be able to use Britain's extremely unfair libel laws to bully people with no institutional power, to call their managers, to threaten their livelihoods, to force critics to be silent. It's no coincidence that social media has brought about the conditions for these people to be spoken back to, and now they're using very real issues that exist online and in wider society to their personal advantage. It's also worth noting that the kind of people who fall into this category with the largest platforms can get away with the most appalling content and commentary. Giant man-baby Giles Korn springs to mind with his recent bouts of social media pants shitting that he got up to, but he was able to get away with it because his name and profile acts as protection from the consequences that other people's names and platforms won't allow. So is it any wonder that this particular class of people seem really in favour of stripping anonymity from everyone else? It needs to be said that there are issues with abuse online, and that there are advocates for a serious look at online anonymity who I don't put in the same category as those blue ticks crying about getting owned online. For example, Diane Abbott, who received almost half of the abuse directed towards female MPs in the run-up to the 2017 general election, may have a reasonable and rational desire to see online abuse dealt with. In fact, while she was Shadow Home Secretary, she demanded that there be a crackdown on anonymity. You can see why this is different from, say, Piers Morgan demanding a crackdown on anonymity. You can also see why England footballer Tyrone Mings would want it to be harder to create fake accounts given the amount of disgusting abuse he and others received in the wake of England's Euro 2020 final defeat. Here's the thing. It doesn't make any sense to strip anonymity, even for these very good reasons, and definitely not for the very bad reason of wanting to be able to call everyone's manager. People who push for a more sensible version of the argument, like Tyrone Mings and Diane Abbott, seem to be connecting two things that can be true at the same time, but aren't necessarily caused by each other. The first thing that's true is that the internet can often be a place where people dish out vile abuse. There's no denial of that from anyone, I don't think. The second thing that's true is that some accounts are anonymous and can engage in the same abuse. But does anonymity cause abuse? Well, if you believe Twitter, ID verification would not have prevented the abuse that happened in the wake of England's Euro 2020 final defeat. Though it is fair to say that we should be cautious about taking a social media company at their word, but it's still interesting to note. If any of you have had the pleasure of being on Facebook, you'll almost certainly have seen some racism, some abuse, some general dickhead behaviour done by someone who's happily posting under their own name. Because here's the thing, if you're a piece of shit, you don't care if people know you're a piece of shit. And you might have a position in society that's unthreatened by being a piece of shit online. In fact, we have an example in South Korea of a real name verification law which was struck down in 2012 for being unconstitutional, but it was in place long enough for some real world data to be taken. It turns out real name laws didn't reduce the amount of swearing, or as the study put it, the majority of troublemakers continued to swear without restraint under their real name, and that a reduction in swearing and other undesirable activity was moderated more by experience online than by the laws themselves.
Concluding thoughts.
The obvious takeaway I have from all of this, which you'll probably have been able to guess ahead of time, is that anonymity seems to be, on the whole, good actually. I don't think you need a reason to be anonymous beyond I want to be. But there are lots of reasons that are deeper than that, and that allow people who otherwise may not be able to have access to what has become a public space over the past few years. Yes, there's abuse. Yes, people will say horrible things. But when taken as a whole, and when compared to the harm that would be done if the right to be anonymous was taken away, I don't think it's worth stripping people of their right to be anonymous, especially when, as I've pointed out, so much of the abuse is done by people who are identifiable or have large platforms of their own. I think there are a lot of well-meaning people who express concerns about anonymity, but a lot of them are fixating on a very, very small overlap between people who express themselves through abuse and people who are anonymous. Experiments in other countries, as well as analysis from social media companies themselves, seem to indicate that anonymity is not the problem here. So whenever someone comes out swinging against anonymity, I think we owe it to the people who will be thrown under the bus by a removal of anonymity to respond with these points and to fight to retain that right for everyone who wants it. Basically, unless you can explain to me why Facebook, which requires real names, remains a cesspit on the internet in spite of that, I don't think there's a compelling case for the idea that the removal of anonymity will improve the quality of discourse online, and that we shouldn't be doing it anyway, since I don't particularly like exposing vulnerable people to risk, and you probably don't either. I just, at the end of the video, want to say thank you to my proofreaders, Mic Wright, and to my partner who was the other proofreader. I also want to thank the people who lent their lovely voices to this video. You can find out all about them down below in the description, but in no particular order. Just a shout out to Gedds, Strang, Matt Holland, Jamie of Praxis Cast, and Nickay AF, as he insisted on being called. And remember everyone, I have a Patreon now, so if you just want to chuck me a quid or chuck me £2.50 and come hang out in my Discord, oh, you can do that now. Otherwise, thank you everyone for sticking it out to the end of the video, and have a good day.